Good morning, church family. Welcome back as we continue our study of Genesis together. Today we're going to be in Genesis chapters 28 and 29, which focus on Jacob marrying Rachel and Leah. As we begin, it's important for us to consider the context of these chapters, particularly the events that precede them. Jacob has just deceived his father Isaac into giving him his blessing. This is part of the birthright of the firstborn Esau. And so Esau's pretty upset about this, and he has vowed to kill Jacob after Isaac dies. And so Rebekah gets wind of this, and she devises a plan to get her son to safety. And so she wants him to go to her family and to find a wife, a suitable wife that is not from the Canaanite people around them. And so we pick up in chapter 28, where Isaac is instructing Jacob to do just what Rebekah said, to go and find a wife with her relatives rather than marrying from the Canaanites. And so we see this passage kind of mirrors that with Abraham seeking a wife for Isaac and instructing his servant to go and find a wife for him. And so we see that both Abraham and Isaac take steps to make sure that their children don't intermarry with the Canaanite people. And this is because the Canaanites are frequently seen as wicked. They're wicked people that Isaac and Abraham don't want to have influence over their children. And so we see that Jacob follows the advice of his parents, and he flees to Paddan Aram, away from his brother Esau. And along the way, he has a dream. And in this dream, we see a couple of significant things. One is that the dream confirms that God wants to carry his promise that he made to Abraham and to Isaac through Jacob's line. And so that's going to be fulfilled through him instead of Esau, the actual firstborn. We also see that God is still interested in dwelling on earth with his people. He wants to be in relationship with them. And so these are two very important things for us to see there. Jacob does something very interesting after this, though, that gives us a little bit of insight into his relationship with God. He constructs a pillar after he has this dream to kind of remember what happened, which is common practice in Canaanite worship, but Jacob should have built an altar to the Lord, which is what his father and Abraham did when the Lord appeared to them. We see those appearances in Genesis chapter 12 and in chapter 26. And so what this shows us, it indicates to us that maybe Jacob has not yet chosen the Lord as his God. And it's actually a little bit later in chapter 32, we see an actual true faith transforming encounter with the Lord for Jacob. And he responds to that by returning back to this place where he had the dream and building an altar. And so it gives us a little bit of insight into his relationship with the Lord. And then we pick up in chapter 29, we see the story of how Jacob ends up marrying both Leah and Rachel. And it's a very interesting story. It's also pretty straightforward, seemingly, but there are some important details it's easy to gloss over, and I think we need to make sure and pay attention to these things. When Jacob finally makes it to Haran, he wastes no time. He begins searching for his relatives, and this is very similar to the story of Isaac and Rebekah, right? The servant gets there and begins to search, but before he does that, he prays to the Lord for guidance. And we see here that Jacob does not do this. He does not pray to the Lord for guidance. And so we see there's no test of character. There's no godly wisdom. He acts instead very impulsively. And so he's so eager to marry Rachel that he promises a bride price of 7 years' wages. And this price would have been far greater than anything that would have been customary at this time. And so this decision was very rash, but it was also something that demonstrated his lack of faith in the Lord, because he should have trusted the Lord to find him the right person, but instead he was taking matters into his own hands. And so his rash decision is then met with Laban's deception, where Laban switches Leah in place of Rachel. And this is ironic considering what Jacob has just done to his brother. And so because of Jacob's impulsiveness and lack of faith in God, he ends up working for Laban for 14 very long years, and all to get what he originally desired, which is to marry Rachel. And so what we learn from this passage is that God continually is faithful despite Jacob's bad decisions and his lack of faith. We also see that God is able to bring about the fulfillment of his promises even in the midst of our failures. And finally, we see that God uses ordinary, flawed people to do extraordinary things. God uses Jacob's family, which is built on deception and even lack of faith, to create the nation of Israel, through which the Messiah would be born.